welcome. This is obviously beautiful. And let me jump right in because I really want to talk a lot about King Herod here. And when Matthew 2 begins, that chapter begins by saying, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. And it's interesting to me that Matthew 2, that begins to tell us the story of the birth of Jesus, wants to put it in an historical context. In the historical context, Matthew wants us to know is that Jesus was born in the time of King Herod. So it seems to me the best way to feel what the Israelites felt at the time of Jesus' birth, it's important to know about King Herod. And I think there's probably no better place to start learning about King Herod than to start right here in Caesarea. So King Herod was a very complicated man. Racially, he was an Arab. His father was from an Arab tribe in the southern part called Idumea. That was in Jordan. You remember us talking about that. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the Herodian. His mother was from Petra. Those of us that did a hike 48 hours ago that you're still feeling the effects of in your legs, you remember that. That's where his mother was from, in present-day Jordan. So racially, he's an Arab. That's crucial to know. Religiously, he's Jewish. So in about 135 BC, a Jewish ruler conquered the Idumeans and forced them to become Jews. And Herod's grandfather was then appointed the governor of the province in Idumea under Jewish rule. So Herod became a Jew religiously. Culturally, though, he was Greek. Greek culture had spread throughout Palestine at the time, and Greek was Herod's first language. But racially, racially he's an Arab, religiously he's a Jew, culturally he's a Greek, but politically he's Roman. In every major conflict in his lifetime, he sided with Rome. Being racially Arab, religiously Jewish, culturally Greek, and politically Roman, Herod was a very complex man. And he was described in his early days as being powerfully built and good-looking. He led armies into battles in 10 different wars. Now, we're living in the day. Matthew tells us that Jesus was born in the time of King Herod. It was also the time of Caesars, where Caesar ruled the world. So Caesar's ruling the world from Rome. How do you rule a country, Israel, from so far away? So if you're ruling all the way from England all the way to India, how do you do it? It would take months or years to travel through your kingdom. So how do you do it? Here's how Caesar would do it. You would conquer a territory, you would put soldiers there, but you would find an internal person to run the country and basically say to them, you will enjoy great perks of being servants of Rome as long as you are a servant of Rome. So they would find a local ruler who preferably was already ruling the people around him, but was willing to make his country subservient to Rome. And if he could find that, then it was a win-win. You have to serve Caesar, but believe me, you will enjoy the benefits of serving Caesar. So in the land of Israel, they proclaimed Herod as king of Israel, he would call himself. The Jews didn't like that, but that's what he was known in the Roman Empire. So here's where it gets interesting. Herod was incredibly smart politically. Eventually, Antony was warring against Octavian for who would be the next ruler in Rome. Herod sided with Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian in that struggle for the control of the Roman Empire. The problem was Octavian won decisively over Antony and Cleopatra. So Antony becomes, a name you know, Caesar Augustus. Octavian becomes Caesar Augustus. So Caesar Augustus overcame Antony. Herod's associated with Antony, so Herod's in some trouble, right? That just makes sense. But Herod was good. And this is what shows you the brilliance of King Herod. He was granted an audience before Caesar Augustus and confessed. He said, yes, I did support Antony, your primary enemy. He admitted he remained loyal to Antony even in defeat. And historians seem to think that Herod was writing his own death sentence. Basically, I sided with the guy that you defeated to become Caesar. But the climax of his speech was this. This is brilliant. He said this. What I ask of you is to consider not whose friend, but what a good friend I was. And Caesar decided that Herod was a man he could trust, and he let him come back to Palestine and continue to rule. That secured his position. So Herod was something else. Brilliant, very complex man when it comes to his background. But perhaps the best word that I've used to describe Herod for years is overkill. Overkill in everything. Overkill with his family. Had over 11 wives, 43 children. Overkill in his cruelty. Herod killed a lot of people. When he conquered Jerusalem, he killed a lot of people. He killed tens of thousands to take over the country. He showed overkill in his loyalty to Caesar. He wanted to make Caesar happy. So he built statues to Caesar, altars to Caesar, inscriptions all over the place to Caesar. Herod would proclaim Caesar is God. And ruling in Jerusalem, building statues to Caesar? I'm thinking of my daughter Allie, Caesars. Where he's building statues to Caesar. That doesn't go over well in a country that the Ten Commandments proclaim very clearly, do not make any graven images. And he's putting images of Caesar all over the place. So he was not loved by the Jewish people. He showed overkill in his extravagance. We're going to visit Masada a few days from now, and it's unbelievable. Herod had many palaces, fortresses. We'll talk about that too. But he decided to build one on the Mediterranean Sea right here. And he wanted a state-of-the-art city. This area was very murky, so he rebuilt the coastline. He drained the marshes, and he called it, it's interesting, he called the name of the city Caesarea for Caesar. Caesar didn't come here. Who enjoyed this luxurious city? Herod. But he calls it Caesar. At the time, it was the largest harbor was in Athens. It was 60 acres, which was huge at the time, and Herod decided to build a larger one. So at this port, he built what at the time was the largest harbor in the world, over 500 acres, compared to 60 in Athens. He brought in concrete from Italy, placed it 80 feet down, and this I'm just getting this information from Biblical Archaeology Journal. Concrete from Italy, placed it 80 feet down under the ocean surface. It was 100 feet wide. This is 2,000 years ago. It's an engineering marvel. He built an underwater sewage system that would drain with the tides. And then there's a problem. You need water, right? If you need a city, you have to have fresh water. So the closest fresh water source is miles away. How many miles are we talking to the fresh water source? 7 miles. How do you bring water 7 miles? He built an aqueduct. You're going to see it. The remains of King Herod's aqueduct are still there. And he made it so it lowered just a little bit. Every meter lowered something like 1 centimeter or something like that, so that gravity would bring water from the mountains, from the spring down here to Caesarea, so they would have fresh water. Today, you will have a chance to stand under that aqueduct that King Herod built. It was overkill in everything. He had a palace that we'll walk to in a little bit. He put a pool over the sea. It was a fresh water pool, as I understand it. He didn't want salt water for his pool. He built an amphitheater. He built this huge stadium. Everything was huge, the best, and always for Caesar, you would say. And it is said one time he was sailing back from Rome. This is what one historian claimed. The Herod didn't think Caesarea looked impressive enough, so he ordered much of the city to be covered in marble. In fact, you'll get a chance to walk the beach later, at least up by, if not here, up by the aqueduct, and you will find little pieces of rock from centuries and centuries ago, pieces of marble. I have one that sits in my office. Titus eventually came and just leveled the city in 70 AD. Overkill in everything. 11 wives, 43 children. He became suspicious of a wife of his, so he had her executed. He viewed his sons as threats to his kingship. One son he drowned in the family pool because he thought he wanted to become king earlier than he should. 2 of his favorite sons were strangled because Herod incorrectly believed they were plotting his death, and those were 2 of his favorites. He was paranoid, he was brilliant, he was brutal. When he had a dispute with a group of Sanhedrin, that's the religious leaders of Israel, he had them executed because he could. And we're told that it bothered him the Jews didn't love him. He thought they should love him because he was a Jew religiously. In fact, he used to disguise himself and go outside of his palace so he could hear what people were saying about him. He ended up dying in Jericho, and before his death, he ordered that all the Jewish leaders of Jericho be surrounded, be brought into the stadium, and upon the time of his death, be slaughtered, so he could be sure there would be mourning in Israel. Thankfully, when he died, they did not follow through with that threat. So Caesarea, this is just one city. you will see the works of Herod. So how did Herod do it all? Here's how he did it. He taxed people to death. And the numbers, you find various numbers talking to different historians. I'm sure it changed through times and places. But here's some of the numbers that I found. 50% of your fish. If you fish, you come in, you give half of it to Herod. 25 to 33% of your grain. So you'd fish all night, you go into port, and there's a tax collector for Herod. 50% for Herod, 25% for me, the tax collector, 25% for you. It's hard to make a living on 75% taxation. And all kinds of taxes. 50% to Herod, 12.5% to Caesar, the Roman tribute tax, the trade tax, the market exchange tax, temple tax, special offerings the Old Testament called for. Many believe it was closer at times to 80 to 90% taxation. And people are living under incredible debt, they're losing their land, they're living on daily wages one day at a time. And why? Why are they taxed so heavily? So Herod could build cities like this. No wonder he wasn't one. And the masses were starving. That's the reign of King Herod. So when Matthew tells us Jesus was born in the time of King Herod, that means something. And Matthew wants us to know that setting. And here we are 2,000 years later, and it's important for us over the next 8 days to feel what that feels like to live under Roman rule and under the rule of King Herod. And now, into that scene, Jesus shows up. And a new king is on the scene. And now as we travel around, remember this. The reason Jesus wasn't fully embraced by all the people of Israel is because they wanted a leader, a Messiah, a ruler to overthrow Herod. And Jesus wasn't in it. And now a new king is on the scene, and those who've been reduced to poverty, they have nots, they have less and less and less. The oppressors are oppressing more and more and more. You've lost your land, you're living hand to mouth, you're counting on the next day of work to give you food. And into this scene, a new king is born. People are heavy in debt, they can't pay their bills, taxes are being raised to build another palace, Herod's living off luxury, off your hard-earned money, living off the backs of your family and your friends and your people. And into your village comes news. Have you heard? A new king has been born. Herod is going down. You can imagine the joy in that. And later, what will be tomorrow, the news will spread. Have you seen what this man from Capernaum is doing? You've got to see this. So imagine the hope that springs in pockets throughout Israel early in Jesus' ministry. But as you know, the kingship of Jesus was not what they expected. They wanted someone to take over for Herod, and he's aiming for the heart. And by the way, politically, I just must say this. We as Christians must remember God is still aiming for hearts, not to take over nations and kingdoms. But the kingdom of Herod, this is what I love. The kingdom of Herod is ancient history, and we will visit his palaces, we will see his pools, and it's archaeological history. And here's what I love, that every time I'm here, it brings a tear to my eye. Our king still reigns. And we will step on Herod's ruins, and our king is here, and he's in charge, and he'll reign forever. And so as we see the amazing things Herod did, I'm telling you, it's pretty amazing. There are things he did that modern scientists are saying, we're not exactly sure how that was accomplished. You will stand in front of a stone in a few days, that the size of it alone will blow your mind. And everywhere we go, we'll see signs of Herod's power. But remember a couple of things. The relief the people were seeking was temporary, and God had bigger relief in mind. Remember this, the kingdom of Jesus is stronger than ever, and Herod's kingdom, Rome's kingdom, is left to history and archaeology. And I think it reminds us that your life may look different long-term than you planned, but God has a bigger picture, because he's way after more than your success or happiness. He's out for your devotion. He's out for your heart. So we're going to see a few things. Now, this city itself, let me just mention very briefly, and we'll talk about some of this as we go. Herod, this is the son of Herod the Great. One of the things about Herod, when he died, he divided his kingdom into 4 parts. He didn't want one of his sons really. He didn't want anybody to be known as great as him. So one of his sons died here. And you can read about that in Acts 12. If you're reading later, just write down Acts 12, 21 through 24. Herod died here because he wouldn't give glory to God. It's an amazing story. Peter, here's what I love. If you read Acts 34 through 36, it was in this city that Peter realizes the gospel is for us, non-Jewish people. It's not just for Mickey. It's for us too. Paul has a lot of experience here. When Paul first came to Christ, they brought him here to Caesarea. When Paul would take his missionary journeys, whenever he would sail from his missionary journeys or to his missionary journeys, he left from here. And I love that. Paul was held arrest in Herod's Palace, right over there. We're going to go out and we're going to walk near Herod's Palace, and we are told in Acts 23, 11 through 23, and then 33 through 35, that Paul was held in Herod's Palace. And if you read chapters 24 and 25, you'll see the famous trial of Paul that happened here. And this is where he appeals to Caesar. Perhaps you remember this story? And so they have to send him to Rome. But that happened here. Also, we'll talk about Pilate later. We'll see evidence of him. But here's final comments, and then we'll start moving here. Here's what I love about this city. Herod wanted to build this city to rival Egypt's port and Rome's port, and so he built it. And this became the place that Peter recognized the gospel was for the Gentiles. This ends up being the sending place for missionaries so the gospel can get around the world. And what I love is this is the city that Peter recognized the gospel was for you and for me. And two things about that. This port was created to proclaim the name of Herod the Great and Caesar. And instead, God used this port to spread the gospel to you. I love how God takes the things that are meant for selfish purposes and uses it for Him. And the only thing we tend to think about with Herod is that he killed a bunch of babies in Bethlehem, and his son did that. But today when you walk the beach, you will see many pieces of Herod's dream, and that's all that's left. Herod built Caesarea for Herod. He wanted to know how great he was. He wanted people to admire him, his power, his greatness. He wanted to advance his political agenda. And I love that this port was built to bring Rome to Judea, and instead this port was used to bring the gospel around the world. That's the greatness of our God. So we'll enjoy this city, we'll enjoy Israel, but always keep in mind that when this all started, God chose to bring Jesus here at the time of King Herod, and that matters. And rejoice that we will walk on ruins, because the kingdom of Herod does not control us. The kingdom of Caesar does not impact us. There are moments in history, we can read about them in books, but the kingdom of Jesus is alive and that's what we celebrate. All right, comments, questions? Yes. They use this for plays. What else would they use this for?
It's a theater. Have you heard the word theater? This is where that came from. It's a Greek thing for two purposes. This thing was used. That is theatrical entertainment, like in America, before the movies. Okay? And for political events. The political events will happen here. May I do one thing, just real briefly, friends? My job is also follow David's steps and connect you with the scriptures. There's one event that took place right here at the theater. Right here. It's a tragic event, but very interesting event, which is described to us in Acts chapter 12. May I read this briefly to you, very, very shortly? It says, Herod went from Judea to Caesarea. Now, this is not Herod the baby killer. Okay, that's his grandson, Herod Agrippa, number one. Okay, and then what happened? On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. Now, guess what? Where can you deliver a public address to the people without using this microphone system, which is not working right now, I understand, but now it is. Right? So where can you talk to multitudes, thousands of people without this? It's only here. Because it's designed for that. Now, what is missing today? Friend, can you imagine that the backstage was up there? Right? Now, why is that? You will lose the sight of the sea, which is beautiful, but you will gain the hearing. Because the voice will bounce. The voice will bounce. And then what? Just ignore the singing for a minute. Just for a minute. I know it's entertaining, but just for one moment, it was not that entertaining then, because what happened is, on the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robe, sat on his throne, delivered public address to the people, and they shouted, what? This is the voice of a God, not of a man. And then immediately, because Herod did not give praise to Big G, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. And guess where that happened? right where you are. So that's why it's so cool. It's almost impossible to guide. I think David has a special connection with Almighty Big G, that there was no groups around and they didn't interfere into the spiel. Gotta be very lucky, because it's just people using this for entertainment even today. All this big rock concert. You cannot, in Israel, you cannot be a rock star without performing here at Caesarea. Nothing changes, right? Since the ancient times. Text 12, right? That's 12 what? Doesn't matter, whatever it is. 19, 20, from 19 to the end of the chapter, you can. But it just illustrates, it's just a little illustration of what happened right here. Okay? Herod Agrippa, number 1, because there was also Herod Agrippa, number 2. Now, it's a little confusing. We'll try to sort it all out, because Herod was a dynasty. He established a dynasty. Being from Houston, now living in Houston, you might remember Dynasty Day, right? The Dynasty in Houston? No?
The show.
No?
They don't have the franchise.
They're going to renew the show. There's a show. There was an American show called The Dynasty that lasted for about 1,000 years, right? No, young people would remember that. That doesn't matter, folks. That's okay. But neither was I. But they showed it on Israeli television with 500 years delay, you see. So that's why I do remember that. He established the dynasty. It was Herod the Great was the first one. Dynasty lasted for 100 years, till 70 AD when this whole thing was destroyed. Okay? And Herod Agrippa, number 1, who died here eaten by worms, was the grandson of Herod the Great. And we will talk more about it. But my reason was only to illustrate that it happened here. Can you imagine? The guy came, right? He put his throne on the stage. It says, in the morning. That's a very interesting detail. Guess why in the morning and why not in the afternoon? Because the sun is where? It's behind you, right? It's showing where? To the stage. So guess what? He on purpose also dressed in this white or silverish robe, so he can what? Shine, and that will remind you what? That he is a god, friends. He is a god. Okay, so that's what he wanted to make sure that people will worship him or relate to him as a god. Would that make Big G happy?
No.
And we read in the book of Acts what happened to Herod. He was eaten by worms here and died. So what we'll do, friends, we will continue to see the highlights of the city. Everything that you see was built by Herod the Great. That predates Jesus just a little bit. 20 years, roughly, before Herod the Great. Herod the Great. Okay, it's the Great. I don't know. Just I know it's a little confusing, but there's a number of Herods there. 100 years dynasty. So Herod the Great built everything here. We will see that. What I would like to do, friends, now logistics. We will walk down slowly. Can you see the exit? Can you see the exit gate in the wall? Can you see that? So we're going to schmooze over there and walk over there. All right? Pay attention that you do not follow the wrong group. Because otherwise you will end up in China. You don't want that.